So this is 1 minute to midnight, that is 23:59 hours GMT. At the same time is 1 minute to midnight in the UK local time, called British Standard Time, on Saturday the 20th of November 2021. So the Financial Times today has got belatedly acknowledging the existence of racism in this country. This follows the coverage of racist behavior in the Yorkshire County Cricket Club, linked with the statements made by Azim Rafiq, including statements he made to a members of parliament select committee called the Media Select Committee, let's say Media and Sports Select Committee. Now, Azim Rafiq has been reportedly expressing his admission that he was ashamed of himself because of comments he made about Jewish people. As we have said, there is no comparison. Factually, evidentially, contextually, there is no comparison between what Azim Rafiq had tweeted more than 10 years ago and what has been done to him by racists in Yorkshire County Cricket Club. So we shall be looking at the financial crimes, because what we say, contrary and in distinct difference from everything that Fleet Street has said, or any of the Fleet Street's broadcasting counterparts like the BBC, Sky News, ITV, Channel 4 News. None of them has actually admitted the fact that racism dominates and rules and controls everything in Britain, and has done without any interruption, any break, forever. Now, the question of understanding racism and doing anything about it and to stopping it is a very different thing from the coverage and the cover-ups, if you like. And we shall be doing the diagnosis of that, world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street as the conduit and as the actual platform, permanent platform for racist lies and denials and distortions. And before we read out this editorial in the Financial Crimes, we assert that this will be in denial of the existence of racism, the all-pervasive, nasty force that dominates and rules everything in Britain. And we start at the bottom. It is so stupid, it says, that the England and Wales Cricket Board, the governing body, must also do better. And it explains why. It says, particularly in a world where South Asia embodies the game's future, that is, cricket's future. Financial crimes is, of course, in denial as well, as we said, predicted before starting to read this editorial comment. It doesn't say that the England and Wales Cricket Board must do better because that is the right thing. It says it should only do better because the world is now witnessing South Asia, which is embodying the game's cricket's future. Think about the difference. The financial crimes is not against racism, but is only against racism because in South Asia, which is where Azim Rafiq comes from, South Asia meaning Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. These are the main countries. And so therefore the only reason for the England and Wales Cricket Club or Cricket Board doing anything against racism is because of the future of the cricket, not a future of the humanity, not future of human rights, not the universal demand and requirement that the England and Wales Cricket Board must comply with. Okay, so the rest of the editorial, English cricket is undermined by racism. English cricket is undermined by racism. That is a racist. That is a racist heading. It's not saying that racism undermines society. Racism undermines sport as well as politics, as well as other aspects of the country. So that's the bias, racist bias based on the superiority being given to or attached to English cricket. Cricket is as British as tea or the Queen. And it says, in a pathetic attempt at irony, which is to say, steeped in colonial history, a breach of the nation's ideals of fair play, is deemed just not cricket. In the days of empire, cricket was exported across the globe as a way to impart British values. Now, this is Macaulay, Thomas Babington Macaulay being invoked here. It was then one thing post-war emigres from the old empire had in common with Britons. So integral is the game to national identity that one former politician infamously suggested that a test of successful integration should be whether immigrants supported the England cricket team or their native country. Now we shall be diagnosing each and every aspect of the racist stupidity of this paragraph. Of course, they're talking about the racist moron Norman Tebbit. Racism row has now engulfed the sport and demanded parliamentary scrutiny precisely because cricket strikes at the heart of what is to be British. What it is to be British, let's say. At the center of the row is Azim Rafiq, who exposed allegedly institutional racism. Now, these morons in the Financial Times, they are still talking about allegedly. They're still in denial. At Yorkshire County Cricket Club, home to several cricket legends and where he played until racist bullying overwhelmed his mental health, according to his claim against the club. Since settled, a Yorkshire County Cricket review found that Rafiq, who left Pakistan aged 10, suffered multiple instances of racism. It apologized but found no need to sanction individuals responsible. A woefully inadequate response, says the Financial Times. Rafiq says racism in cricket is a problem up and down the country. His complaints of slurs dismissed as banter will resonate with many, as will claims that foregoing a hard drinking culture limited career advancement. Complaints at other clubs are emerging. Rafiq has been undermined by revelations of his own anti-Semitic comments from 2011. While he has apologized, it shows how normalized racism is in sport and more broadly. Now, that is absolute contradictory rubbish. Because nothing has been revealed about Azim Rafiq's alleged racism about Jewish people that can even compare, factually compare with what he has been subjected to by the Yorkshire County Cricket Club racists. So the financial crimes is lying. English cricket's race problem demonstrably extends beyond Yorkshire. It is absolute lies because it's not English cricket's race problem. It is England's race problem and demonstrably extends beyond any part of the sport and it dominates everything in the country. And then there is this diversity display rubbish. It says the lack of representation is striking. What they mean is that there should be diversity in cricket. Now, no matter what the diversity is, that is not equal to not being racist. And the fact that that is not equal to not being racist is proven by the fact that Azim Rafiq himself was diversity. And he was captain of the club. And yet he was taunted, he was berated, and he was insulted, and he was racistly bullied. And then when he complained, all these attacks on him based on racism and racist motivation were dismissed by the racists and their apologists as mere banter. And then it says players of color. Why can't they call people Asian and African? Players of color is not the identification, the recognition of the people based on their actual origin and their background and their descent. That is also the fact that they call them players of color is itself racist. The dwindling participation in cricket in state schools may play a part. The technical experience, the technical expertise that cricket demands favors. Cricket demands favors those coached intensively from a young age, given an advantage to private schools with cricketing traditions. But that does not explain why British Asians are not making the top teams when it is so popular within the community. British Asians comprise about 30% of amateur cricketers, but only 4% of professional ones. In Yorkshire, Rafiq believes racism was to blame. He echoes Imran Khan, the Prime Minister of Pakistan and former professional cricketer, who suggested in 1999 that Yorkshire was prejudiced in overlooking British Asian players despite a deep local talent pool. Yorkshire only set aside a rule in 1992 stipulating players had to be born there. The rule, Rafiq argues, referring to the region's historic symbol, led to segregation and a persistent desire to keep the white rose of Yorkshire white. Long-standing attitudes are hard to shift. All the more reason why YCCC needs to grasp the nettle. This scandal is as much about the club's dismal response as it is about the allegations themselves. Rafiq's testimony shows how good leadership can alter behavior. He stated that the only time he felt safe was under Jason Gillespie, a coach who is part indigenous Australian and uncompromising in tackling racism. The England and Wales Cricket Board, the governing body, must also do better, particularly in a world where South Asia embodies the game's future. Plans to split the ECB to focus on international matches, the counties, and grassroots game may have merit if they lead to better outreach with diverse communities and harsher penalties for county clubs that do not improve their cultures. If cricket is to remain a mirror for Britain's values, it must ensure equal access and opportunity for all. Now, this is banal, contradictory, half-cooked, and ignorant and idiotic, and doesn't really examine and expose cricket racism, let alone expose the racism of the rest of the country. And we shall be talking more about racism, of course, in context, because it's not about just the game of cricket. It's about football as well and other games and other sports including Asian original sports, traditional sports that are not even mentioned, like kabaddi. Kabaddi is the most kind of longest running traditional game right across the subcontinent. India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Kabaddi is very, very widely played, very, very widely popular, but it's being stifled. And that is racist as well. And it's stifled also by influence and propaganda being waged across the subcontinent, in other words, so-called South Asia. And here is a piece by John Gappa about the tea. So let's see what they're saying about tea on page 13 of the Financial Crimes. Weekend Financial Crimes. Now, the Weekend Financial Crimes is not edited, well, apparently not edited by the main weekday Financial Times editor. It's edited by somebody who is himself racist. And that may explain partly, not all of it, part of the reason why this editorial about England cricket is undermined by racism. It doesn't accuse racism of undermining sport and culture and society. So we shall be talking about that later, more about that, not necessarily in the later parts of this edition, but we shall be what is happening with the cover-up and coverage. So we shall, as I said, we shall talk later, not necessarily later in this part, but later in our programs and bulletins and editions, because we need to talk about today's papers, including the Financial Crimes itself, overdoing the lying propaganda for HS2. Anyone who can access the actual contents, the printed contents of the Fleet Street papers during the, let's say, period of 2004, 2005 till 2010, let's say, about Crossrail, we'll find that Fleet Street liars were blindly promoting Crossrail, which we call crass roll. They were playing crass roll for crass rail. What do we mean by that? What we mean by that is the way they described Crossrail, and they described the benefits they claimed Crossrail would bring to the East End of London, because our campaign against Crossrail was based on the opposition to Crossrail hole that was being plotted to be dug right in the middle of Brick Lane. That is why the KhoodeelaR campaign was set up, to stop the Crossrail hole. And we succeeded in stopping the Crossrail hole, mainly because we persuaded enough people in the area to agree with us that it was illogical, it was irrational, it was unnecessary, it was not a good thing to do. So quite apart from the technical details and the various lying promises that the promoters of the lying Crossrail hole plot perpetrated through the local lying Tower Hamlets Council. Most people didn't agree with the local Tower Hamlets corrupt, crooked council. The cross rail project and the cross rail plot to dig a hole in the middle of Brick Lane was a good thing. Now, we have said since, and we have said increasingly in the last, let's say, 5-6 years, with the intensity of the obstinacy in promoting HS2 by the conservative government, that those who are opposing HS2 would only succeed in stopping the HS2 being foisted if they followed the Khoodeelaar campaign's strategic tactics. And the first thing we said, and we have said, and we are saying, is that political decisions in terms of parliamentary kind of motions being passed can only be undermined if the people right across the HS2 line or route or alignment or alignments, like members of parliament, were affected in terms of career, in terms of losing their careers. And the way that they would be faced with losing their careers and their positions would be if the people in the area understood the physical impact of destroying the environment, destroying the trees, murdering millions of animals. And for what? All these murders and destructions were going to be perpetrated for no good at all, because the benefits that the criminals promoting HS2 have been claiming it would bring simply don't exist. Number one, in terms of the actual evidence of people using railway transport, the numbers of people using railway transport are going down. Number two, there is no destination within the UK in London, because if they're coming from Birmingham or Manchester or other parts in the north by high-speed rail to London, where would they be going? They would not be going beyond London. They would not be going across the channel because of Brexit and because of the various blocks that have been created by Brexit and the ideology that drives and has driven Brexit, which is to create hostility towards the mainland of Europe. And thirdly, there is nothing happening in the mainland of Europe in terms of industrial activities that demands people from the north of England to go there for any industrial activity, industrial employment, so on. So what is the driving reason, purpose for keeping HS2 continuing at all? There is nothing. And going back to number one, that the decline in railway transport has been being registered consistently for a number of years. Why has that decline been happening? The answer is that the railway companies, the fare, the cost of transport by trains has been going up. So cost is a very central issue in demand and supply. If the transport cost is too much, then there has to be a compensation in terms of the transport undertaken. What is the compensation that is available as a result of the journeys? Nothing. So this is the argument that has to be, this set of arguments, let's say, has had to be made by people who genuinely want HS2 to be scrapped, just like Crossrail was kind of diagnosed by us, saying that the benefits that the promoters of Crossrail were promising to people in Tower Hamlets, people in East London, simply did not exist. Now, what are the benefits? That is the very secret clue. The benefit is nothing to do with transport. Nothing whatsoever to do with transport at all. It is to do with property. For example, in today's papers, they are saying that because the particular branch of HS2 has been abandoned in the declarations by Grant Shapps and the actual Boris Johnson fronted cabal yesterday, it is impossible to sell the many houses and properties that people were wrongly persuaded to buy in the neighborhood of the line. So it is stupid because it is nothing to do with transport. It is to do with creating a false attractiveness to the properties that are sited or situated near the alignment of HS2. That is stupid because the actual promoters of the HS2 line and alignment and the project never said that they were going to, that they were actually engaged in creating a property market, attractive property market. They never said that. They said always, and they're still not saying it anything about property. They're saying that HS2 is a transport miracle, a magical transport situation, which is absolute bullshit. As we said in the 7 years of our original analysis of London's then existing transport networks, we said that those mainly underground lines across London that were in need of repair, serious repair, if they were repaired, then the number of people carried on them and the efficiency of the lines would more than supersede the so-called capacity that the promoters of Crossrail were promising through Crossrail. And Crossrail is not right across London. Crossrail is one line serving through London. So the majority of Fleet Street unthinkingly copied and repeated the lies being promoted by or promised by promoters of Crossrail. They never went into the details. They never went into the actual particulars of the numbers of people, nor did they actually address the actual existing supposed lack of capacity that the supposed Crossrail would actually meet. And in the case, for example, of Tower Hamlets, the corrupt Tower Hamlets Council said absolutely stupid things, like Crossrail would bring large numbers of students to the local kind of medical facilities, like the Royal London Hospital would have a medical facility or medical school or something. That is stupid. A medical school cannot be bringing thousands and thousands and thousands of students. A medical school, by definition, can only bring a limited number of students. So that cannot be in any way part of the argument for promoting a project that was going to destroy the area, Brick Lane, destroy thousands of properties, make thousands of people dislocated from their business, their homes. So this is the kind of stupidity and idiocy. When you examine the actual contents of this stupidity and the idiocy, you can see that it comes apart, which is what the opponents of HS2 should have been doing, but they're not doing it. And I shall expose them as being racists themselves, because they don't want to expose a, quote, patriotic British government by telling the whole truth about its unpatriotic things against the majority of the ordinary people affected by the displacement foisted on them by HS2 adventures and madness, which is what happened or happens with most campaigns that are run in this country, apparently run in this country, but they're not run completely, truthfully. And that is why these campaigns fail. They don't fail because intrinsically and inherently, the arguments, the basic facts, make them not worth fighting for and make them not liable to succeed. They are liable to succeed if the people behind the campaign are actually determined to tell the whole truth. Now, when I say people, in the case of HS2, it's lots and lots of people in lots and lots of areas, hundreds of miles covered by the proposed project. So it's not one particular local community, not even one particular regional community. It's people right across the alignment. And nobody has actually argued, completely covering each and every segment, each and every mile of the proposed corrupt cross-rail adventure. Now, why do I say corrupt? Because the actual people who are forcing the argument into the public arena and demand within quotation marks for HS2 are the contractors, people who are either already in contract about HS2 worth billions of pounds, or who are set to benefit and profit from billions of pounds worth of HS2 contracts. They couldn't care less about no benefit coming to the local people as a result of the, quote, completed HS2. They are concerned about pocketing the loot, the billions of pounds right now, and it's more than 100 billion pounds already. So that's we have discussed the financial crimes. Let's see if the Daily Star has got its share of the HS2 lies. Okay, so they've got this one on page 2 of the Daily Star. Daily Star is the name of the Daily Star, the tabloid, part of the Beaverbrook Legacy of Lies Daily Express group. Now, Daily Star was founded long after Beaverbrook died. So I launched a campaign against the Daily Star when it was headquartered in Fleet Street itself. And the Daily Star was edited by a racist called Hitchens, or Hitchin, who ran a racist piece against a family of Bangladeshis in Hitchin, the town Hertfordshire Hitchin. And I shall come back to talking more about the campaign that I organized against the Daily Scar at the beginning of its life. Now, this is on page 2 of the Scar of Saturday, the 20th of November 2021, and they are giving a play on the word train. And they're saying strain driver, union's fury over lack of blues. And it is the item as a caption to Johnson running, a picture of Johnson running, and they're calling it Bozo on the run, has got the last paragraph. Boris Johnson is also facing outrage over his party's sleaze scandals and HS2 cuts. Now this is the picture. Strain driver, he is running. Now, HS2 cuts. HS2 in the last, let's say, several years has only featured on the internet as the target of attacks by opponents correctly. But the attacks have been made, as I said, without due dedication to exposing the lies and the corruption and the profit scam for the contractors that the HS2 has become. So let's see what the unions are saying about the and this piece about strain driver is saying that there are not enough loos or adequate access to loos for drivers. But it doesn't talk about the reality. Doesn't talk about the reality of transport, doesn't talk about the literally millions of issues that ordinary people needing to use proper transport are denied the facilities and the dignity and the respect. Now, transport in this country ordinary people in this country across the kind of counties, let's say, or countries, England, Little England, Scotland, Wales, Cornwall, and Northern Ireland, whatever the description, transport is getting worse. Public transport is getting worse. And the cost of transport is getting worse. And there is no description of any of these elements in the promotions for Crossrail that actually dominate the main regional coverage in the Fleet Street papers today, Saturday, the 20th of November 2021. So this car is not carrying anything else today about the HS2, but the Guardian. We shall look at the Guardian and what the Guardian is having to say. Now there is a front page picture of Melanie Sykes, a television person, and they've got a detailed piece on page 12 containing her statements. Of the first summary on page 1 quotes her as saying, "I just thought I was less mature. Now I know the education system wasn't set up for me." And it says that Melanie Sykes is on her diagnosis of autism. And what the main front page piece on the top of that page says, Tories fueling racism by rejecting multiculturalism. Now, this is something that The Guardian is running as a follow-up to Azim Rafiq's disclosures about the bullying, racist bullying and racist attacks that he has been suffering at the hands of Yorkshire cricket. But this word multiculturalism is not something based on what Azim Rafiq has said. This is something that is given credit for to a opportunist careerist called Bhikkhu Prik. Well, Bhikkhu Prik is in the House of Peers. And Bhikkhu Prik is not necessarily playing the same role as Trevor Terrible Phillips. But Bhikkhu Prik is as much to blame for the racism in the Labour Party and the racism in the House of Peers, racism in this country, racism in the media. Like the Institute of Race Relations and its now deceased kind of dictator, A. Shivanandan, Bhikkhu Prik has been promoted by the likes of The Guardian and the rest of the British establishment as a reliable opponent of racism. Why? Because he doesn't really oppose racism. That's why he's treated as reliable opponent of racism, who is of Asian background. Bhikkhu Prik is from Gujarat in India, and A. Shivanandan was from Sri Lanka. Now, Shivanandan ran the Institute of Race Relations with the help of a white woman, and the Institute of Race Relations, the white woman played the part that Saida Warsi said in a reported statement. The white advantage, whatever the blonde advantage, we shall come to the actual quote. Remember, we are diagnosing Fleet Street and the racism that has been the focus of Fleet Street coverage reluctantly because of Azim Rafiq's statements. So we are diagnosing Fleet Street, world exclusive diagnosis of the racist Fleet Street. We are continuing that. Now let's say Saida Warsi. What did Saida Warsi say about the blonde? Whatever Saida Warsi says, and we shall come to that, about the blonde, is actually itself proof of the brainwashing that goes on in Little England. It is absolutely shocking. All right, the quote is not available through the Google search, but I shall do as much as I can to paraphrase from memory, and we shall update accordingly when we come across the actual quote. What she said, Saida Warsi, at a given time, was that if an Asian person or a black person, presumably the African black person, uses a white blonde woman as a front or as a partner in a project, whatever it is, then that fact, a blonde, young blonde being involved, will be treated by the mainstream media in Britain as prima facie respectable. On the face of it, respectable, recognizable. Prima facie is on the face of it. Prima facie is a Latin phrase, and it means on the face. So what Saida Warsi said about the inclusion of a blonde person, whether the blonde color was natural or artificial, didn't make any difference because it was the image, the vision. So what Saida Warsi said there, it surfaced a few years ago. I mean, she didn't make the comment a few years ago. She made the comment a few years before when it became kind of mentioned again a few years ago. So what she said about the blonde person being included in a project and that fact being treated by the mainstream, which is mainly majority of the mainstream observers, decision makers being white people, also showed the general equilibrium and the general equation that prevailed at the time in Little England in the UK, and it has continued to prevail. In fact, it has got even worse. Whether the person involved is a blonde, white, young blonde person or not, objectively should not make any difference as to the quality or the character or the merit of a particular project. But the fact that it does make a difference shows that there is lack of quality, lack of ethics, there is lack of morality, and there is most certainly lack of universal education among the public in this country, which means that there is this inbuilt bias built in the system, in the attitude, in the brainwashed outlook of the people making the decision or observing a particular project or a particular argument, that they are biased, and they are biased in favor of a white, young, blonde person as against being against the equality and equal rights and entitlements of people who are not blonde or not young blonde, etc. Now, what Saida Warsi said didn't have anything in her mind at the time to do with what the various magistrates or judges have done, let's say in the last 10 years. When a blonde or blonde-haired, whether originally blonde or colored blonde person, accused of murder or accused of assault or accused of fraud has appeared before a magistrate or a county court judge or a judge, the judge or judges, mainly white males, have let that particular accused off the charges and let them go. They have not convicted them, and they have not most certainly imprisoned them or punished them. So what I said about what Saida Warsi said, having an actual root and connection and practical kind of presence among the ordinary people in this country is vindicated, well, proven, let's say, by the behavior of these judges. And this is something that hopefully should be there available on the so what do you search? Okay, so there is this, again, that particular search has not produced any result in this search because it will probably require longer search attempts. But this is on the Rolling Stone. This is Rolling Stone online, and it's about the 6th of January riot on the Capitol. And this is a heading, Capitol rioter who bragged that she is definitely not going to jail, is definitely going to jail now. You have been very upfront that you feel no sense of shame or guilt. A judge told defendant Jenna Ryan, a Texas real estate agent who boasted, this is the thing, who boasted that her blonde hair and white skin, two of the factors the Saida Warsi actually used, would protect her from a prison sentence. Now, where did she get that idea? That her blonde hair and the white skin would protect her from being held to account for crimes that she had obviously committed. So this is the kind of two of the factors. One is blonde and the other is white. Of course, black people cannot be blonde, of course. But let's
Get ready for our mission.
So this one is the one that says blonde hair, white skin Capitol rioter heads to prison and Trump associations subpoenaed over the January 6th. So let's see what the video says.
To protect. A mission we can only complete together. Give your kids the superpower of strong teeth with Oral-B.
Well, that is.
On that one.
I thought I was following my president.
He's Donald Trump. I got them. $1.9 trillion released. And more. United States. Fox News. Get vaccinated.
likes that. Don't do that anymore. Save the sexy talk for bedtime with Dr. Jill. We're also not even a year into his presidency. Joe Biden, don't worry, he's like an old grandpa at the wheel. He'll get us there. It's going to happen very slowly with the blinker on the whole ride. Okay? There's only one president in the history of polling whose approval rating was worse than Biden's at this point. You want to guess which president it was? I'll give you a hint. His name rhymes with garbage dump. That's right. He's Donald Trump, our dearest leader. Suffered a little setback yesterday, or last night rather. He's been trying to stop Congress from getting their hands on the visitor logs and the call logs and documents related to the events of January 6th. Late last night, Trump asked a federal judge to prevent the records from being released. The judge denied that late night request. Trump was like, "You're just like Melania." But this could be bad for Donald Trump if these documents are made public. We may finally know whether Trump and his associates were as involved in the events of January 6th as we already know they were. The congressional committee investigating the Capitol riot issued subpoenas today for 10 of Donald Corleone's associates. That's on top of the 6 subpoenas they issued Monday. Congress wants them to provide testimony and to shed light on the war room that was assembled at the Willard Hotel in D.C., where Trump's minions brainstormed ways to overturn the election. Boy, if they do ever end up arresting Trump, they should let Hillary cuff him. Shouldn't they just or something? Greg Kelly from Newsmax took some time to commiserate with one of these heroic martyrs, and this should tell you just about all you need to know about these people. Tell us where you are right now. Set the scene. You're on phone, in jail. Where? How does it work? What's going on where you are right now?
Right now, I am in what I'd like to refer to as DC Info, but we're in the DC DOC Correctional Facility, and I can only describe it as psychologically damaging, torturous, and inhumane here. Solitary confinement for anywhere between 18 to 26 hours per day. It used to be upwards of 23 to 30 hours per day. Wow, Alice.
So this is too much irrelevance is coming before the point of the quotation. But the woman who boasted that because she was blonde and she had white skin, she would not be going to jail, but she was, of course, sentenced to go to jail. So the concept of white skin and female and blonde haired has been doing the rounds, and it has gone, if you like, traction. It has got traction, which is what informally must have been kind of in front of Saida Warsi's mind when her eyes and observations, when she made that remark, that if you do that combination, and if you include a white blonde as part of the agenda, then you are more likely to succeed, which automatically proves the injustice and the racism and the bias that exists in society, or exists in what remains of society. So that's the fact. So prima facie, if somebody on the face of it appears before the court and is in a white-skinned woman, blonde haired, then they expect, and the system expects, that she or they will be exonerated from any charge, no matter how grave. As I said, we shall look in the future, look for the evidence of the various cases that have involved a judge or judges letting off blonde accused, and we shall update duly. So what are we talking about? We are talking about Azim Rafiq, and we are talking about the coverage in the Fleet Street papers. The coverage amounting to cover up because they are desperate to find something that undermines the claims of racism that made Azim Rafiq the feature of the center of the news items and publications. And it is absolutely unbelievable. This, by all description, this criminal who was apparently killed in the explosion that kind of took place in the taxi near the or outside the Liverpool Women Hospital or Liverpool Hospital for Women. There are too many contradictory items. So the textbook principle of journalism that are supposed to be taught new journalists, wannabe journalists, are the places like the National NCTJ, National Council for Training of Journalists, for example, which is the more widely noted one. We shall go back to that in a minute, but this is the Peter Brooks cartoon in the Times on page 35 of Saturday, the 20th of November, 2021. And it has got the kind of caricatured image of Winston Churchill, which is kind of obviously a caricature that is based on Boris Johnson's structure. But Winston Churchill's cigar and hat. And in that persona, in that combined persona, there is this quotation, "I have nothing to offer but boosterism, jokes, and empty promises." That's the thing that is the cartoon is saying about Boris Johnson. Now, Peter Brooks is being kind to Boris Johnson because Boris Johnson actually would have claimed by now that he is Winston Churchill. But that is what should be the cartoon. That Boris Johnson was restrained from announcing that he is Winston Churchill. I'm saying that. Now here is a piece by Ben McIntyre in the Times on page 39, and it talks about that Malcolm X was murdered, and this piece says that FBI must come clean about the X-Files, that is, miscarriage of justice over Black activists' murder. Is just part of a conspiracy of silence that has lasted half a century. So we'll read the first paragraph, and depending on how it is, I shall see whether I will read more. Two of the men convicted of murdering Malcolm X have finally been exonerated, ending one of the longest, strangest miscarriages of justice in the US history. Muhammad Aziz and Khalil Islam were sentenced to life imprisonment for gunning down the Black civil rights leader in a Manhattan ballroom in 1965. Both denied being at the Audubon ballroom, that night, and the FBI withheld key evidence that would probably have led to their acquittal. They spent more than 20 years in prison. Cyrus Vance Jr., the Manhattan District Attorney, who led the review of the case, admitted that while the injustice could never be reversed, what you can do is to acknowledge the severity of the error. There is something else the FBI can do to right this wrong, and that is to release all the files without omission or redaction relating to the Bureau's long-running efforts to target Malcolm X and other black leaders under the shadowy and illegal FBI project known as COINTELPRO, a program designed to monitor, infiltrate, and undermine black political organizations in the 1960s. Until and unless the FBI reveals the extent of its involvement in the assassination of Malcolm X, this case will remain a festering wound in America's race relations and a hotbed of conspiracy theory. And in the last two paragraphs reads, the acknowledgement that FBI helped to convict the wrong people for Malcolm X's murder goes somewhere to tackling the great miasma of black suspicion that surrounds his death. But the best way to demonstrate that black lives really matter, including this one, that is Malcolm X, would be to release the federal records on this and every other COINTELPRO case. There is nothing more to be revealed from the official archives about the assassination of John F. Kennedy, while mystery shrouds that of Malcolm X. And there is one other key difference between these famous murders. There was no concerted, covert, government-funded operation to undermine J.F. Kennedy before his death. But in the case of Malcolm X, there was. So it's not racism in Yorkshire County Cricket Club. Racism in America, racism in the United Kingdom. Dominate the states, dominate the governments. And we shall be continuing to check what else is there about the Azim Rafiq testimony. And there are 2 pages plus other lengthy articles against migrants and promoting the latest ugly messages against migrants issued by Priti Patel. And there is a piece in the Times on page, let's see, is it 16? Page 16, which is absolutely bizarre. If the Daily Mail's kind of lies against this Church of England was not bad enough, there is this one. Liverpool bomber reverted to Islam in months before attack. Now, this guy apparently converted to Christianity. And apparently the people, the pair, the white pair, the Christian pair that supposedly helped him convert to Christianity, have been given coverage as being astounded and baffled and sad at his behavior. Now, what on earth do these people think is going on with racism? This is absolutely racist. 7 years, this criminal, because that is all, that this criminal seeking asylum for 7 years, and he was denied asylum. And that is, according to Rupert Murdoch's scum, that is why he wreaked revenge. He carried out the so-called bombing as revenge against asylum rejection and refusal. This one is not belonging to any faith. This is crime, a desperate crime. It's nothing to do with terrorism, to further any ideology, nothing whatsoever. But it is about according to the report in the scum, about the 7-year-long battle that he fought to get accepted as an asylum seeking migrant for settlement by Britain. We shall come to that more in a minute. And the fantastic thing about this faith, this Anglican faith of the Christianity, is being put upside down here in a piece by Matthew Paris. Now, this is the same Anglican Church that the Mail this week, the Daily Mail group, has condemned for allowing the likes of this Liverpool so-called bomber to do the thing like believe that believing in Christian God furthers one's asylum ambitions. So the Daily Mail has condemned the Anglican Church for propagating such promises. According to the Daily Mail and the Priti Patel, that kind of promise and that kind of collusion with the conversion of a potential asylum seeker constitutes a crime against Little England. So here is Anglicanism was never really about God, says Matthew Paris. So we shall come to that in a minute after taking a look at page 35, where Janice Turner is given a column space. The heading is Yorkshire's ugly secret was no surprise to me. What she is referring to is the issue of racism. Now, how she is presenting this is quite significant. She is saying it's a short step from the God's own country cussedness and exceptionalism to a fear of outsiders, and then racism. And so she's saying I pulled a tea towels on a high shelf, and Yorkshire County Cricket Club official souvenir tumbled down. It must be from my parents' house, since my father was a Yorkshire County Cricket Club member for over 50 years. I see him now setting off to Headingley, Scarborough, or behind enemy lines, Old Trafford. My mum picking his snap into Tupperware boxes, his battered sun hat with white rose. In Yorkshire, cricket was always a working class sport. As a boy, my dad and his pals batted until dusk. A wicket chalked on the shed door. He joined the Wanderers who, unable to afford their own ground, always played away. Even when dying, he talked Yorkshire cricket with a young male carer who joked, "Well, you are not out yet, Dennis." And my father managed to whisper, "How is that?" Yorkshire cricket is woven into the county's own mythology. I heard a lot of that too growing up. God's own country. How Yorkshire was so huge and mighty. They, Southerners, had to chop it into ridings and later south, north, west, and Humberside to hamstring its rough rebel power. Yorkshire believed it must look out for itself or be screwed over, not unreasonably, as proved by broken rail promises this week. So this is the reference she's making to the two things. Yorkshire's tradition, and she's going to boast about racism, and then she's going to promote HS2. Well, this is a piece by a Yorkshire-born and brought up person, Jenny Starner. And we shall be reading some of the things that she has said. What she's saying there, she went to school there in Yorkshire where she was born. And for a piece in the Times, this one is a first in my view. So what is she saying? She's also referring to so she's talking about her father and admitting that he was racist. And we should come to that because this is a piece that, as I said, this is not the piece that the like of which has appeared in the Times in an autobiographical way, because this Jenny Starner is a columnist on the Times, and I often assume she is a racist as well because of the narrative and the lines that she often endorses, maybe not as harshly or severely as others, but she does. That is one reason why she's given the platform by Dr. Digger Murdoch as a columnist on the Times. But this one is evidentially and factually, contextually, topically, absolutely essential to read. And she's referring to Saida Warsi, but we'll come to that in a she's saying, that the rows I had with my father, the words he would use, which had me storming from the house, stomping dark streets, swearing I'd never come home again. For all that, he'd barely met a brown person, I mean, her father. Brown meaning Asian person. My town was almost entirely white. My school had maybe 2 black children. By that she must mean African, not Asian. And they must have endured hell, given that my friend, who is white but originally from Surrey in England, got enough grief for her southern bowels. I had assumed things had improved now that the demographics have shifted. Asian cabbies take me from Doncaster station, and Morrison's is full of pakoras and Rogan Josh. No doubt they have improved among an enlightened younger generation. But I was unsurprised by what happened to Azim Rafiq. If being born a Yorkshireman was blessed, playing cricket for Yorkshire was to be divine. No wonder it was reserved only for those born on sacred Yorkshire soil until 1992. The County Cricket Club is Yorkshire exceptionalism's Grand Lodge. The birth rule kept the club white decades after every other had at least a token black player. She's admitting the token black player. After that, the old guard had to retain purity by cruder means. What hurt my heart, that is heart, our soul, most was Rafiq's broad York Barnsley accent. All he wanted was to belong, to play for the team revered by his community, to be a proud Yorkshireman too. All that abuse he sucked down, the slights, the P-words, crass gags about elephant washers and corner shops. Even now, more sad than angry, he believes teammates who apologize deserve a second chance. He noted a different culture when loaned to Derbyshire, only a short distance south. In Yorkshire, he saw visiting foreign players, even black ones, treated warmly, while the homegrown Asians were disdained. How very Yorkshire, I thought. You are our most welcome guest. Let's get the kettle on. Just don't ever think you are one of us. What a waste of the club that racism stopped it using one of its greatest resources. While white boys are drawn to football, it's British Asians who play cricket, with the obsession of my father as a boy. Go to India or Pakistan, and in every dusky village, back street, you see a skinny brown lad running up to bowl. The fathers or grandfathers of men like Rafiq brought that love over to Barnsley or Bradford and placed it on the steps of Headingley as a gift. Only for small-minded blowhards to kick it away. That Asians make up 30% of grassroots cricket, but only 4% of professionals isn't just despicable, it's profoundly dumb. Think not just what Asians could do for cricket, but what cricket could do for Yorkshire's stark racial divide. Interviewing Baroness Warsi in Dewsbury once, I was struck by how two communities with separate schools, clubs, and lives were plunked together in the moors. Cricket could enable integration. Instead, Asians had to set up their own league, which Yorkshire County Cricket Club ensured did not fail into its talent pool. My father's racism was a product of his all-white life. He once visited London when our house was being painted by West Indian decorators, led by the elderly, very proper Mr. Miller. I dreaded what my dad might say. But after a week of chatting and making tea, he declared, Mr. Miller is a craftsman. If that most cussed of old Yorkshiremen could shift his views, so can the willfully blind who have kept the county's cricket club frozen in time. So that's Janice Turner. We have read more of her column than this one than we ever did, and there's only evidence from the context and evidentially. Now, this is the piece by, that's another piece by the, and Matthew Perry said, let's go back to the Church of England. Well, we should do that in a minute. Let's take a look at the Now, why is the Times leading, running a leader saying that Paul Decker would have much to offer Ofcom? We shall examine that in due time. Now, here is the piece by Matthew Paris. And it says, Anglicanism was never really about God. Rather than seeking new converts, Welby, that is Justin Welby, the current chief of the church, should cherish his aging flock who are more for ritual and music than doctrine. Okay, so this is the piece that Matthew Paris has written about the church. And he says that for the first time in her 69-year reign, the Queen did not deliver the opening address to the Church of England's annual General Synod last week. This was certainly not a royal commentary on the state of the English Church. There is non-abdication now stealthily underway. But still there is something melancholy, something epoch-making, something bleak about the monarch's absence. For Anglicanism, it is not going well. Later, the Archbishop of York's speech to the synod sounded like the echo of a foghorn in an advancing fog, only to reinforce the shudder. Stephen Cottrell considered that the church might be dying, even if decline could not be reversed, and hopefully it could. He told the General Synod, let our death be a grand operatic death. Let it be something fantastic. Let's not crawl into a corner. Dr. Cottrell has an attractive habit of blurting things out. He went on to nail the question but not the answer. The church, he said, must not simply manage decline gracefully. So what is this purpose of this piece by Matthew Paris? So this is the piece about the future of racism. It's not using the term racism as much, but that is what it is. So this piece about the Church of England, Anglican Church never being about God, by Matthew Paris, is not about religion, not about the Church of England, not about humanity at all. All right, so we're coming to the question of the daily, the Times running the editorial about Paul Decker and Ofcom. The Times editorial about Ofcom and Paul Decker, let's read this one, because in the 90s, I had a long-running exchange with Decker when he was editing the Times, the same title that is. And my exchange was about the piece written by Libby Pervert in the Times supporting the murder of cats, or supporting the idea of showing cruelty to cats. Well, that never will change. And I wrote a number of letters, but the Times refused to publish them, despite the fact that those letters were well argued and the evidence was absolutely perfect. So that's my relationship with Paul Decker, who was completely cruel and, of course, prejudiced and was racist, because my name is very, very loudly spelt with leaving hardly any confusion or any doubt as to my background, etc., etc. Okay, so this is the piece that the Times has written in support of Paul Decker. The Times is saying that Paul Decker would have had much to offer as chairman of Ofcom. Ofcom is the so-called regulator for broadcasters. In the context, it has got other duties, but broadcasting is the one that comes to mind most of all. So it said that in the present political climate, it was perhaps inevitable that Paul Decker should have decided against reapplying to be chairman of Ofcom, the media regulator, despite the backing of Downing Street. There is no such place as Downing Street. It's Boris Johnson. The former Daily Mail editor's candidacy had previously been blocked by a panel that had deemed him unappointable. The government's response was to return the process with a different panel that included individuals with links to senior conservatives. But after the Committee on Standards in Public Life took aim at the public appointment process, and in particular at packed panels for ministers to have continued to press Mr. Decker's candidacy, risked fueling allegations of cronyism. While Mr. Decker's decision, revealed in a letter to the Times today, may spare the government's blushes, his experience raises worrying questions about the extent to which appointments to public bodies are dominated by what he calls a left-leaning blob, susceptible to groupthink and hostile to outsiders. Now, all of these, I'm saying at this stage before continuing with the Times leader piece, all of these, if they are allegations or accusations, of bias and unfairness apply to Paul Decker more than they apply to anybody else. Decker is a liar. Decker is a criminal confecter of decades who lied on every major issue affecting the so-called society over the last decades that he has been in post as editor. Ofcom faces formidable challenges, not least in trying to regulate omnipotent, ruthless, immoral tech giants without damaging freedom of speech, but also in charting a future for the BBC. As a former newspaper editor, Mr. Decker would have considerable insight to bring to such role. Yet he was told he was rejected because he revealed strong convictions. Of course, it is an important principle of public life that appointments to senior jobs should be on merit rather than driven by political connections. But if public trust is to be maintained, it is vital that the panel's judges or judging that merit are not exclusively drawn from a narrow, self-serving elite. Independence cut both ways. A media regulator that has room on its board for two former BBC executives but not a former national newspaper editor risks failing this basic test. Now the Times is lying. Why? Because only in the last fortnight, reports based on the statements of Rachel Johnson. Rachel Johnson is the sister, biological sister, as well as a supporter of Boris Johnson personally, has disclosed that Darty Digger Murdoch, who owns the Times, which has this editorial supporting Paul Decker, Darty Digger Rupert Murdoch told Boris Johnson during a meeting at Chequers that Boris Johnson should scrap the BBC, not make minor appointments, minor changes here and there, but that Boris Johnson should actually scrap, ban, kind of end the BBC. Now, I am not a fan of the BBC, but I'm a fan of something bigger than the BBC or any particular organization. A platform, an organization, and a corporation that tells the truth or has the potential of telling the truth. It goes, my standards go far closer to what has been attributed to the man who is supposed to be the founder of the BBC, Reith. So we shall be coming more on that later. Here is the piece about the BBC, about broadcasting, about the media, but it is based on reports that Andrew Marr, who has been fronting the Andrew Marr show on the BBC for 16 years, is now going to join the LBC and get his own voice back. It is that bit, getting his own voice back, that actually warrants a bit of detailed diagnosis. Now, the fact that Marr is being quoted as saying that He's leaving after 16 years to get his voice back. Actually proves the fact that he has been lying for 16 years. What does getting his voice back mean? If they don't mean that he for 16 years has been lying. Okay, so this is a bit in the Guardian piece that refers to those items about Rachel Johnson saying to Boris Johnson at Chequers that Boris Johnson should destroy the BBC. Now, that is in contrast with the editorial that the Times is running today, Blob Rule, that is Saturday, in arguing for Ofcom to be regulated chaired by Paul Decker. Now, what the Times is not saying there about its interest in Paul Decker being the chair of the Ofcom is because of the upcoming broadcasting outlet that Dirty Digger is launching, Talk Television, fronted by none other than the racist criminal lawyer Piers Morgan. And here in the Guardian piece on Andrew Marr, it says on page 21, it refers to Andrew Marr talking about the BBC. He said the Guardian last year that he believed there was a drive on to destroy the BBC. Exactly what Rachel Johnson has said. Murdoch asked Boris Johnson to carry out. Andrew Marr, according to the Guardian piece by Jim Watterson and Kevin Rawlinson, said, the Murdoch Empire and others are trying to push us towards a world in which the BBC is pretty marginal. And people are getting most of their news and their views from privately funded television companies, as in America. Now, that is a contradiction there. Of course, that is factually, objectively, verifiably true. But then why does Mark say that he's leaving the BBC is about his finding the voice again? What voice is he talking about that he didn't have while he was presenting the Andrew Marr show? And this is the actual point. This is the actual point that actually warrants examination. Tories fueling racism by rejecting multiculturalism. Now, this is of course based on Biko Prick. Now, Biko Prick was given more platforms in Britain than his talents or his contributions or his personality warranted. And Jack Straw was one of the people that backed Biko Prick. About Jack Straw is quoted in the Guardian piece as when he was Home Secretary at the time, as praising a report by Biko Prick as the most important contribution to the national debate on racial discrimination for many years. That is an absolute rubbish. Because Biko Prick is a thief, a moral thief, an intellectual thief, and an imitator. Above all, he is a kind of competitor, rival. He is intolerant of people who are actively engaged in thinking and writing and speaking against racism, because he feels that he is challenged and threatened by them as the possible kind of recipient of platforms and opportunities, etc. That is all rubbish, because Biko Prick is an obstructive prick for the racists. So the Guardian's piece about the statement quoted in the piece made by then Home Secretary Jack Straw gives away the game, because it's not about the debate. It should not be about debate. Racism, opposing racism should not be about a debate. Opposing racism is to find ways to oppose racism, acknowledge racism, and oppose it. And the whole list of things that Prick is being kind of given credit for saying about changing Britain by the Asians and the what he means by black people as well, the African people, is really not the main list. The main list is about the empire about imperialism, about racism in Africa and Asia that the British actually inflicted and exploited and abused. The African people in this country, the people from Asia, mainly the subcontinent, would not be here without empire. And that is and has been and will always be the most devastating kind of change to the lives and the backgrounds of the people of Africa and Asia. What the Guardian is writing is because the Guardian is itself racist and stupid. And the name of this person, Amna Mohdeen, Community Affairs Correspondent, exclusive author of key report, speaks out after crisis in cricket, is complete rubbish. Of course, he is taking the kind of opportunity to get himself in the news. But what he's saying does not amount to anything remotely substantial as it should be.
This daylight saving time has everyone all screwed up.
So nothing that Andrew Marr has said in The Guardian is original. And it follows that nothing that the Times has said in the editorial is original. And here is the piece about racism in context. This is the racist piece on the front page of The Guardian. On the front page of the Times of Saturday, 20th of November 2021, where it says Johnson is saying that he demands migrant fix. It's like a drug. What does he mean? So what we shall be doing on Johnson's racism about migrants, we shall be taking a look in the next part or later. And there is this piece about Priti Patel's Racist Divide by Brian Reed, frank and fearless and funny. Somehow the Daily Mail fails on every occasion. So what is this one doing here? So this is the one that I referred to without mentioning the Daily Mail, which is about the propaganda that liars for HS2 made about this. Page, and the Daily Mail is lying, of course. On page 10, it carries a so-called quote, the Stop HS2 Yorkshire, Stop HS2. And they're saying that cutting that particular extension, HS2 extension, the Shimar estate in Maxborough, South Yorkshire, and below protest posters in one resident's window. It says 115 million down the high-speed train drain, that is HS2. So it's saying that's the bill for buying houses on abandoned HS2 route, and they can't even be sold off yet. So it's saying more than 115 million of taxpayers' cash, remember, was wasted buying hundreds of homes along the section of the HS2 route that was scrapped this week. A total of 455 properties were bought on the high-speed rail line's original eastern leg, which was supposed to link Birmingham with Leeds. But the government announced on Thursday that this section will now only go to East Midlands Parkway, southwest of Nottingham. This means around 2/3 of the eastern leg has been axed, and it is understood most of the 455 properties were located along this section. Now, this is the point that I made about the Crossrail lies. They said that Crossrail would bring benefits. Now, our campaign against Crossrail Hole began in December 2003. So we campaigned on a round-the-clock basis against the Crossrail Hole plot. From 2003 calendar years, 2003, 2004, 2005, 6, 7, 8, 9, up to almost 2010. And in that period, we examined all the evidence and all the technical reports and all the aspects. And we found no evidence whatsoever that there was any knowledge on the part of the people in the East End, let alone any expectation on the part of the people in the East End of any benefit coming to the area as a result of Crossrail. So in the last few years, long after that project, the digging of the hole in Brick Lane was successfully stopped by us, criminals started to put the promise about that Crossrail would bring property values. The prices of properties and residential and tenancy around the or on the sides of the Crossrail alignment would hit the skies. That is a good thing they portrayed. But anyone who knows the East End of London or East London would know that ordinary people, local people, don't have either the money or the properties that matches that kind of speculative frenzy. And there has been none. There has been no real kind of benefit experienced by ordinary local people in either Tower Hamlets or in Newham or in Barking or wherever. The only thing that speculation has fueled is outsiders, people who are nothing to do with the community and people who had no connection with the area. But we have got money and they have poured the money into properties they have bought for exploitation. So it's not solving the problem of the housing problem of the community. It's not improving the local areas. It's not improving the local anything. So that should be the strongest point or set of points that opponents of Crossrail along the whole route should be promulgating, shouting, demanding all the time. But that's not what the Daily Mail is saying. The Daily Mail is saying that property speculation has been proven completely unrealizable and wasteful. Over in France, there is this character that is adding extra racism to the polemic and the rhetoric around the French presidential election. Eric Zemmour, the right-wing French presidential hopeful, says he will bend the European Union to his will on the issues of including ending mass migration. Now, this is the word migration that serves as a powerful explosive trigger to incite racists in France, racists in Germany, racists in Britain, and racists in other parts of the Western European part of the continent to hating. And what we have to do is to find the evidence for any of the claims made by any of the media, any of the politicians that are complicit in the racist propaganda at the expense of migrants, to identify what evidence they base any of their hateful propaganda and their so-called agenda on. And there is no evidence. The only evidence there is that all these member countries of the United Nations, every time they say something against the migrants, too many migrants crossing and too many migrants being poised to cross between European countries, is that they are in breach of the United Nations charters, breach of other international treaties, other declarations, including the Migrants Convention. And there is no mention in the Guardian. Remember the Guardian? There is no mention in the Guardian, in the Daily Mirror, in the Financial Times even, because the editorial that we read about Yorkshire cricket, There is no mention in that editorial either of any of the articles, let alone any of the breaches of the articles. And the daily bribing Boris Graf on page 21 has got an editorial against the migrants as well. And there is this new word that is being used by the Times, by both Paul Decker and also by the criminal liar Charles Moore, the blob. And this is about the Elgin marbles. This is such a big and there are pieces in trying to kind of excuse Brenda's son Andrew in light of new revelations about his connections with Epstein. Epstein the pimp. Now here is a typical example of the corruption and the incompetence in the UK state. So it says HMRC reveals risk to public data from its IT systems. Concerns have been raised over HMRC pushing ahead with digitization of tax after its annual report reveals a security risk to the public's data. The tax authority is pressing forward with its Making Tax Digital program, which mandates that businesses and individuals must keep digital records and file their income quarterly. So now this is the tip of the iceberg. The admission by the tax authority, the HMRC, that individuals' data are at risk is the tip of the iceberg because there is no accountability anywhere within the state agencies. And that includes all the agencies, including the courts, the police, the prosecution service, the government departments, the members of parliament, local council, the various platforms and fronts of the council are allowed to use to carry out their own corruption and criminality. Now we go back to the question of the BBC being unfit, and Fiona Bruce is in a bizarre spat over unconscious racism. There is no unconscious racism. There is racism. There is nothing unconscious about it. So Nazir Afzal, that is, who is a retired CPS lawyer, was on the Thursday's question time, and he accused Fiona Bruce of unconscious racism because he was the first one she asked to answer a particular question. And Nazir Afzal accused her of being unconsciously racist. So we go back to this front page on the Guardian today, Saturday, that is, 20th of November 2021, and say again that racism rules the country. It's not just the cricket club, not just one part. Everything is racist. So on that point, we shall be concluding this particular part A.